From CNBC, carrying the conversation, Trump threatens to put 200% tariff on French champagne and other EU spirits. French champagne is redundant as it is only champagne if it is from Champagne. That's right. Otherwise,
like saying biological male.
Exactly. Sparkling wine. That's what we'd call it. So it is funny. It's not just champagne. It's wine as well. And that's actually kind of a big deal because people who know wine don't like California wine. They'll try to sell it to you at these upscale restaurants, but everybody knows the good stuff comes from Europe. My attitude is make it better, America. But basically what happens is Trump does this big blanket tariff on aluminum and steel. The EU immediately retaliates on red state stuff like motorcycles and whiskey. Trump then says, okay, then wine. Because the tariffs that are being put in place by Canada and by the EU are targeting specific industries in red areas so that Trump loses or the Republicans lose the midterms. It is in the intention of those tariffs and retaliation are to affect us politically and give these other countries power over us. I reject that. I say carry on, Trump. Do your thing. I'm a fan of the tariffs.
I'm not a fan of the tariffs in principle. If he's looking for a result, that's fine. But they seem to be very haphazard. I'm not sure what we get out of tariffs on champagne. These kind of things seem like they're not really directed. If he's got a goal and there's if it is going to benefit the United States by bringing jobs back or creating an industry or helping to charge an industry that's fallen behind in the U.S., fine. But I'm not just okay with tariffs because Trump's doing it.
Well, that's because they have a tariff on American whiskey. So I understand retaliating in that case. People.
But they want to negatively impact red state business.
Well, some of them, yeah.
And then what's going to happen is you're gonna lose residents, you're gonna lose revenue. There's going to be there's going to be a large portion of rather apolitical people who are going to say, I don't know, I don't care, I just wanted my job, and they're going to vote Democrat. This is going to hinder. Look, Trump was elected by with a popular mandate to fix the problems of this country. One of which was how our manufacturing base has been eviscerated. And much of our culture gets eviscerated along with it. When Trump says we want to put a tariff on aluminum and steel, he's not saying screw you, Canada, and screw you, the EU. He's saying, guys, I need to make steel and aluminum competitive in my own country so we can bring this manufacturing back. In response, Canada and the EU are like, if we can't make money off you, you can't make money off us. But their retaliatory tariffs target us politically. The tariffs that Trump put in place didn't have the intention of getting Trudeau removed from power. That was his own fault. Or it's not trying to destabilize the EU politically so that right-wing parties win. That's what they're doing to us. That's messed up.
That tariff makes sense, that one on alcohol, because what's going to happen? France is going to say, okay, we're not going to put tariffs on your whiskey anymore. And then they can all drop the tariffs. Now, with the automotive industry, for example, production of cars in Detroit or wherever in America.
Not anymore.
It's well, there's still an automotive industry going on. There's parts going back and forth. And the production of these automobiles is very integrated between the two countries. So, the critics in Canada will say, what's Trump doing? He's putting tariffs on, taking them off, putting them on, taking them off. This is all calculated. He's producing instability because what does it do? It makes American corporations who hate instability, it makes them more likely to build their product in America. And as we just saw with Mexico, another automotive plant is moving all their production back into the U.S. So there's a purpose to this. Now, I can argue some of these tariff wars going on with Canada, some of it doesn't make sense. What really doesn't make sense is the response by all of Canada's major political leaders, including the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, because they say, we're going to respond with tariffs. What is a tariff? When you slap a tariff on America, what are you doing? You're not penalizing the Americans. You're penalizing Canadians because a tariff on America is a tax on imports paid by Canadians. 17% of our GDP is exports into the U.S. It's a very small percentage of GDP America into Canada. We're not going to win a trade war with them. What they should be saying, and what Poilievre should be saying, is Trudeau has caused all these problems. Trudeau did nothing about the fentanyl. Trudeau's done nothing about all this fentanyl coming across the border. And Trudeau should be using this to attack his political enemy in Canada instead of doing the exact same thing that Trudeau and all the other political parties are doing, which is starting a war with Trump. Not smart, and it's being evidenced in the polls where Poilievre had a massive lead, an almost unbeatable lead. He was going to have a massive majority. Now he's not even in majority territory.
But if the Conservatives win in Canada, is that really going to fix things, or is it just a Band-Aid on a bullet wound?
So I say they're Liberal light. They're certainly a lot better than the Liberals. It's hard to be that bad because the Liberals are pretty much straight up communists.
What is their platform exactly?
So the Conservative platform?
Yeah.
Well, this is the problem. Pierre has been running on a campaign of we need to have a carbon tax election. So the Liberals introduced a carbon tax, a consumer carbon tax that we pay on our gasoline and other forms of energy, and it keeps going up every year. And so is that an issue? Absolutely, it's an issue. They should be addressing it. I think it's a little bit down the pecking order. The Liberals wanted to introduce a bill that would make it hate speech to comment on certain things that could potentially see you go to prison for life. They want to reduce our freedom of speech. They want to trans kids. They want to harm children. They want to introduce all these radical leftist policies that the Conservatives privately are against, but never speak up about publicly. So Pierre would be better for our freedom of speech because he's not going to introduce these hate speech laws. What else would he be better at? Honestly, I have to think about it because they run on so many of the same issues. I think he would be a little bit better economically, but it's only a little bit better.
So why vote for them? Why vote for them?
Personally, I would vote for them because freedom of speech is such an important issue, and that's coming under attack in many Western nations, including Canada. And I think they will be personally better on gender ideology. Having said that, they voted for a bill called Bill C-4, which made it a crime for parents to protect their kids from this cult. If you convince your little girl she's a boy, that's totally fine. But if your girl comes home from school or she's been indoctrinated online and she thinks she's a boy, and you say, no, sweetheart, that's not right, you're a girl, and you try to help her feel comfortable as a girl, that's now technically a crime of conversion therapy, and parents can go to jail for up to 5 years. And the Conservatives fast-tracked that bill and passed it unanimously.
The Conservatives.
So there was a bill before called C-6. Some of the Conservatives voted against it. Some voted for it. Then an election was called. The bill came back as C-4. And they didn't want to deal with the leftist media calling them bigots. So the Conservatives fast-tracked it and passed it unanimously.
Wow. There are some states that basically have this law as well. There was a story that when I don't want to say viral necessarily, but was shared around the like detransitioner community where this guy told a story online in a forum. He got called into a school, and the school told him that he had a son, not a daughter, and that his daughter, now his son, had gender dysphoria, and they were going to start social transition, and they wanted to start a regiment for gender transition. And so the dad thanked the school and said, what do I do? Just tell me what to do. Thank you so much for saving my child. And they said, wonderful. We're so glad you agree. They said, you're going to go to the doctor. Here's how you do it. He said, wonderful. Immediately went home, packed up everything, got his kid, moved away from that place and said, we really appreciate everything you did for us. Our family's moving because I got a new job, but we'll make sure we get my son the care he needs. As soon as he moved out to the rural area, he said totally removed his daughter from all of the media that she'd been using, and within 3 months, she was back to being a normal teenage girl.
Yeah, I have friends who moved from Washington State to Florida to protect their daughter because they have that bill there. Just today, actually, it was announced that the Supreme Court is going to take up a case in Colorado regarding their conversion therapy bill. So to be clear, these conversion therapy bills make it a crime to try to change someone's sexual orientation. And most people agree we shouldn't be doing that. And guess what? It's a virtual non-existent practice. This isn't happening. But the real reason for these bills is this second component that they sneak in there. And it's about trying to convert someone's gender identity.
But what's wrong with conversion therapy?
Yeah, I was just about to say,
well,
if it's an adult that's seeking out therapy because they have whatever religious or moral qualms with same-sex activity and they don't want to engage in that and want to seek out the root cause of it in themselves, why should they be restricted from doing that by the state?
Yes, those
27
people,
states have banned conversion therapy.
That's insane.
Yes, so people with same-sex attraction, if they want to talk to somebody about that, they should be allowed to have that conversation. But therapists in all these states won't even talk to them.
And that's also something that can be weaponized against religious therapists. I know like a lot of Catholics seek out specifically Catholic therapists. A Catholic therapist who agrees with church teaching on these things is not going to encourage you to go down the route of gender transition, obviously.
Right.
But they are now in danger of being targeted by this bill.
Right. So the Supreme Court's going to take up this Colorado bill, but strategically, conservatives need to get the message that the way they should be talking about these conversion therapy bills is they should be addressing the gender identity component. Because that's the real reason these bills are written. It's also, politically speaking, a much bigger win. The same-sex, homosexual conversion therapy is a non-issue. This isn't a big deal. But what's happening is in all these blue states that have passed these laws, therapists won't even talk to these kids who are struggling with gender identity issues. And I say gender identity with quotes because there's no such thing as a gender identity. We have personalities. That's all it is. And personalities don't require a sex change. If a boy is more effeminate, if a girl is more masculine, a masculine girl is called a tomboy. That doesn't mean she's a boy. She doesn't have a male gender identity. This whole thing is cult speak. And she's just a beautiful girl. That's what she is.
And a effeminate boy is called a sissy.
If you want to go there.
I mean, I'm not trying to be crass. That's literally what the other boys would call a small, effeminate male.
Well, you know, if we want to get into this, if we look back in history before they started giving kids these drugs and surgeries to change their sex, to do child transition, gender dysphoria, this discomfort with your sex, affected mostly boys. It was maybe 1 out of 30,000. It started at a very young age. And we look at all the academic studies that were done where they followed these kids from the age of 3, 4, 5 up into their 20s. The biggest study that was done, 87.8% of these boys, when they went through puberty, their gender dysphoria desisted. It went away. And 63.6% grew up to be gay.
Yep.
So now they're telling these same kids who would grow up to be gay that they were born in the wrong body, that they're supposed to be a girl. They give them puberty blockers at Tanner stage 2, which is the onset of puberty. So their genitals aren't going to grow. Girls' breasts aren't going to grow. Their hips don't get wider. It's causing bone demineralization, a whole host of problems. Cancers, even anecdotally. We don't know all the long-term impacts because there's never been a clinical study and you can't even do an ethical one. But we're telling these same kids now that would grow up to be gay that they were born wrong.
So have you talked to detransitioners, and have you noticed as well that most of these detransitioners are female? And I wonder what's your take on why that may be.
Yes, so this is a social...
I've noticed like almost all of the outspoken detransitioners are female.
Yeah, that's right. There's a young man called Abel Garcia who speaks out about this a lot. He was just in D.C. for Detransition Day yesterday, actually. But this is a social contagion affecting girls. Abigail Schreier's book is called The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters for a reason. It's impacting girls. And almost all these kids are on the autism spectrum, or they've had sexual abuse or trauma, or there's some mental health comorbidity going on. We know from the Gender Identity Development Service in the UK that 70% of the kids there had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities. But now we treat gender as though it's the source of all of it, and we ignore all these other mental health problems.
Well, one of the biggest issues with it is in places like New York, and this is most liberal jurisdictions, gender identity is defined as, quite literally, self-expression. So if you look at, have you ever taken a dive into New York's human rights law? It actually, the New York City Charter actually defines, or the city code defines what gender identity is, and it says your self-expression. The way you dress, the name you call yourself, the pronouns you choose to use, and it is legal to call yourself anything. And no public accommodation can reject you because of it.
Right. Let's look at what's going on here, though. So the left for years told us that we shouldn't put kids in some stereotypical box. There's no right or wrong way to be a girl or boy. I say this all the time, and the most rabid leftist trans activists can't disagree with me. But then in their next breath, they say, oh, this girl isn't conforming to stereotypes, so therefore she must be a boy, and we'd better cut off her breasts.
That's all motivated reasoning, though. Like they want people to be like them, the activists I'm talking about. They want to see more people that are trans. They want to see people that are, involved in the LGBTQ ideology or whatever. I'm not sure exactly why it is that they feel the need to, but it's all motivated reasoning.
100% right. So this brings me to a very important point. I'm actually suing the Australian government right now on a freedom of speech issue. Last year, about a year ago, there's a woman named Teddy Cook in Australia. She runs their LGBTQ organization. She's an activist. She's a woman who says she's a man. She's cut off her breasts. She's all tatted up. She's all hairy. And she posts pictures of bestiality on her social media. She says trans-identified people have better sex when they're high on illicit drugs. She posts about trans orgies. All this crazy stuff. Naturally, the World Health Organization put her on a panel of 20 experts to write healthcare policy for trans-identified kids and adults. I wrote a post saying this woman, yes, she's a female, because people get confused when they see the beard and everything. She's been appointed to this panel at the WHO, and I wrote, people who belong in psychiatric wards are writing policy for people who belong in psychiatric wards. I will confess this is not my nicest tweet in the history of the world. Technically accurate. I'm not saying all people who identify as trans belong in a psychiatric ward. The most extreme ones, absolutely. And this is one of those people. So to your point, they are trying to recruit people for their own ideology. They don't want them to be their true selves. Yeah. They just want them to be trans. And all across the world, the people who feel this way are the ones writing healthcare policy.
I do. We have a lot more to talk about on this. Obviously, it's a big area of expertise, but I think we should save a bit more for the uncensored portion of the show, as we can get a little bit more into a lot of the people behind this stuff. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.